You should have brought me the coffee. All right, so I apologize for the shoes, but they broke, so I had to put these on. I thought I was doing great this year. I got the hat, I got the outfit, and my shoes fell apart. So it's always going to be something. But Devarim, we're going to go back to the Torah portion a little bit, and I don't want to reread the whole passage. We had, I think, a really good overview in the Torah service this morning, and Eddie has referred to parts of it, and I want to look at a few parts of it. But my question is, are we going to fight through, or are we going to go back? Maybe it depends on what we intend to do when we set out. How about that? What did you intend to do? And this is going to go all the way back to Bilam and Balak. How many of you realize that certain stories just stay with the Israelites? And they even end up in the book of Revelation. In fact, from the war that was waged on the Midianites over the deception of Bilam and Balak, if you do a little math, you come up with 144,000. And so these little chunks of Torah portion, they keep ending up in the book of Revelation. And so if we kind of look at Bilam and Balak, the first thing Bilam was told was go or don't go. Don't go. But he talks himself into it. And he says, okay, if you're going to go, go. But in the way, what gets in the way? The donkey didn't get in the way. Y'all need coffee more than I do. You know, the donkey was runner-up. When the beasts were getting together to figure out who would go talk to Adam and Eve, we know the serpent, of course, won the contest because he was the most cunning. But I think the donkey was probably the runner-up. Pretty close. But at any rate, we know that Bilam set off with an ill purpose. He set out to curse, even though with his mouth he keeps saying the right things. If we didn't know the context of the story, we would think that Bilam earnestly desired to do exactly what the Lord told him. There's going to be people among us like that. If we just look at the words that, or listen to the words that come out of, I wish we could see them too sometimes, because I think they would look scary. What if you could see words? But if we have the context of what Bilam is doing, there's ill intent. So should he fight through or should he go back? He should have gone back. He should have turned around. See, if we set out to curse the congregation of Elohim, you probably need to turn around and go back. But if you set out to bless the congregation of Elohim, you may need to fight through. That's maybe what it takes. And what I'm going to go through, it's a little bit heavy, and I know you're not going to have a whole lot of context. This is really about 3 lessons, and I'm trying to condense it down into something that fits with the Torah portion. I didn't choose this, my students did, because sometimes I don't have the greatest read on what reaches them at a real practical level. My head's in the clouds a lot, and the fog, but, you know. And so I ask them sometimes, what do you think I should share? If there's something coming up, what do you think has changed your life? What has made an immediate difference? And it seemed like recently this is what they said. It has to do with angels and the angelic majesties. And as we're going through the wilderness, we realized there's going to be a lot of spiritual interference going on. And what we need is skill in knowing whether we need to fight through this interference, or we need to turn around and go back. Because maybe we started out with the wrong intent. Or if we know we're on the right track, we might have to fight through. So out of the Torah portion, Deuteronomy 1, I wanted to point out, sliding down to verse 8, He says, "See, I have placed the land before you. Go in and take possession of the land which the Lord swore to give to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and to their descendants after them. And I spoke to you at that time, saying, I am not able to endure you alone." That's tough words from a leader. "The Lord your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are this day like the stars of heaven in number. May the Lord, the God of your fathers, increase you 1,000 times more than you are, and bless you just as he promised you. How can I alone endure the burden and the weight of you and your strife?" There was strife in the wilderness. There was the strife of tongues. So he says, here's the remedy. "Obtain for yourselves men who are wise, discerning, and informed from your tribes, and I will appoint them as your heads. And you answered me and said, the thing which you have said to do is good. So I took the heads of your tribes, wise and informed men, and appointed them as heads over you, commanders of thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens, and officers for your tribe." And then as we slide on down to verse 19, he says, "Then we set out from Horeb and went through all the great and terrible wilderness that you saw on the way." And then on verse 21, "See, the Lord your God has placed the land before you. Go up, take possession, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has spoken to you. Do not fear or be dismayed." So in this case, we have a clear missive: go forward. If you know what your calling is, you go forward. You fight through. But sometimes we think we have a calling to go forward when actually something has been placed in our path to redirect. Because maybe we set out on what we thought was the right path, and as it turns out, that wasn't the right one at all. And so if we're off on the right path, we might meet with some resistance. Now, how can we counter this? We're going to go back to the wilderness. If we're in a staging area at this very moment for going up to inherit our land, if we're staging right now, that means we have to practice. And so we look at the patterns of the wilderness. Last night we looked at the wonderful things that came out of the wilderness. And so that was an encouragement to us. We can say, we know these things can be given to us in this wilderness as we stage, as we prepare the little flocks to go up. But what we notice in the encampment, of course, the Mishkan is going to be the center of this encampment, but it's very orderly how the tribes encamp around. And maybe that's part of our disorder. We're all trying to figure out what tribe we're in, when at this point I don't know that it's relevant. We might be worried about which tribe we're in too soon, because we have an identity before we even know how to behave in some sense. If that makes, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but in Eddie's history walk with us, I can see that. We kind of thought we knew who we were, but we had no idea how to behave as we were. And so we got the cart before the horse in a lot of situations. But as we're in the wilderness, I think we can expect a time will come when organization will also come. And I think we've approached that stage of development. He's beginning to order things out of a chaos of people running hither and thither. To and fro, up and down. And so the encampment being very orderly, remember, you've got 3 tribes facing each direction, and so you've got them facing basically in the direction of the 4 winds. We also know that they're the angels of the 4 winds. You know, when those winds start blowing, is it going to be tribulation on earth? Yes, but it is also going to resurrect dry bones. The intention, as you're reading in some of the sources that are really breaking down these encampments and how they functioned and analyzing the banners that they camped under, they say that the original plan out here in the wilderness, even, it was prophetic of what was later going to happen in Jerusalem. Once they came up from the wilderness, they were settled in their land, then these 12 tribes, as Moses is saying, you know, this is too great, I'm going to have to appoint judges so that you can judge among yourselves. And it was small groups, bigger groups, big group. And if it's too much, take it to Moses. But the original plan, the rabbis say, is that in Jerusalem, that these 12 gates of the city would be judged by the 12 tribes. And so as the Levites and the priests ministered to the tribes of Israel, so the 12 tribes of Israel would be ministers, would be priests to the nations. And so, yes, we're still a nation of priests, which means we need to have a good grasp of his word so that we will know how to judge. If this is the staging area, we need to know, this is what I say, do the Torah portions. How are you going to judge what you don't know? There's so many topics out there that are going to waste your energy, going to waste your days, going to waste your time. And it's not going to help you judge from any gate of Jerusalem. It's just not going to come up there. I can guarantee you it will not come up to that gate. And you'll look back and you'll say, how did I waste all that time studying that? Why did I think that was more important than what was in the week's Torah portion? Why was I an expert on that topic when I needed to know my portion in the Torah in order to be an effective judge? And so they say in this sense, if Israel was encamped in harmony with one another, in perfect order, judging according to what Moses is saying here, then the way they would function is as some sort of divinely appointed machine that made the world run peacefully. And I've always thought, if we could archaeologically isolate those layers of when Israel was in the wilderness, encamped in those times of harmony, would we find that there was a very peaceful weather pattern all across the earth. We know there were times of turmoil. But see, this is what they were supposed to be doing. They controlled the weather, it's thought. You say, people want the earth to be green and all this. Well, stop sinning. Just quit sinning. The earth will get green. That's all you got to do. It'll cool down. It's your sin that's heating it up. So cool off. We get a few glaciers back, right? But this was the role of Israel. It was said to affect the entire world because the blessings would flow from these 12 tribes out to the nations. And so how much more once they finally graduated and went up from the wilderness and they settled, they built Jerusalem, established the 12 gates of Jerusalem like you see them in Revelation, and they began to judge. And this would begin to restore a peace to the whole earth. But interestingly, they failed and failed and failed and failed, just like we do. But they say, because this failed, there was only one who was thought to be able to bring harmony to the four winds. Guess who he is? The Messiah. The rabbis say this, that only Messiah will be able to bring peace to the four winds. And so how we work with Messiah is part of that job. Because, again, if we encamp with one another, what does it say? As we encamp, so shall our journey be. If we can camp together in peace, then we can move in peace when it's time to move. If we're fighting with one another while we're encamped, then as he starts to move us, we will also continue to be arguing and fighting, and you don't get in that way. You can't show that ID. You won't pass. You shall not pass. So, oops, wrong movie right there. Long time ago, just like that. Bad memories. So, we've got this appointment of the judges in the wilderness. And what are they supposed to do in judging the Torah? Bring harmony to the earth. And Abraham was promised that his children would be as numerous as the stars of the sky and the dust of the earth. That was promised to him back in Genesis 13:16. The problem with that particular promise is the word for dust is afar. Not like the wise men came from afar, but like the Hebrew word, afar. And it really means rubbish and ashes. So Abraham, your children are going to be rubbish and ashes. But as numerous as the dust of the earth. But what happened in the wilderness is they were refined. They became a different kind of dust. They became the avaka type of dust, which is associated with this fragrant powder of the merchant. And I'm going to show you in the Song of Songs where this is mentioned. But the idea is that transformation of Israel from this rubbishy dust into this scented powder that's suitable for use as incense. It's a perfume. There's a transformation there, and at the center of it is the Mishkan. Because remember, his presence wants to dwell among us. If we will allow his presence to dwell among us, then we can be transformed from some of these rubbishy, dusty ideas we set out with when we leave Egypt, and he can gradually begin to transform us into the scented powders, suitable for the incense, suitable for the sacrifices. But it's here in this wilderness that Israel is receiving a commission of authority to rule. It's not random that the judges being appointed are in that particular passage. He's preparing them to go over the Yarden. If you're going to go over the Yarden, you're going to have to do it in unity. You're going to have to do it in order. You're going to have to understand principalities and powers. You're going to have to understand orders of authority. And as Americans, we tend to hate that word. Our skin crawls when we hear the word control. But you realize everything in the temple system, in the Mishkan, in the Torah itself, it's a matter of order, being decent and being in order, because the freedom can grow out of those places. And that'll be the freedom of the spirit that is pure, that is clean. But if we don't understand orders of authority, then we will habitually and often ignorantly violate those boundaries. And then we'll end up in somebody's space. Or we'll let our boundary down and let people in our space that shouldn't be in our space. Our practice, again, is looking at the Torah and saying, what are the judgments there? Why was it so important to appoint these judges even in the wilderness, even before they reached the promised land? Well, Moses says, because you're just too big a load. That's why. And so setting these orders of authority within your flocks, that's going to be important. If you want to cut down on the arguing, if you want to have the decency, if you want to have the order, you're going to have these leaders. Now, a judge or a ruler can go by different names in Scripture. And this is where Yeshua got into the neatest hermeneutical argument ever. When they accused him of blaspheming by making himself equal with God, he took them to school using hermeneutics. And I love that. Like, if you know what you're talking about, and then the people talking to you who should be knowing what they're talking about, you find out they really don't know what they're talking about. They just want to accuse. And it went back to the word Elohim, using the word Elohim, which sometimes it is Elohim with a big E in English, God himself, the creator, and sometimes an Elohim is a judge. Sometimes an Elohim is a ruler, a prince of something. That's another word for it, Sar, like Sar Shalom, Prince of Peace. Shoftim, those are also judges or rulers. So there's different words you can use that will mean somebody that's in charge, a judge, a ruler, has authority over something. That's all it means. But it can also refer to an angel, right? And so this is, you see where this would go south real quick, like it did with the conversation with Yeshua. Well, you're blaspheming by calling yourself Elohim. And he says, no, wait a minute. Let's go back and look at what the verse says. Because if I'm calling myself Elohim and I'm blaspheming, then you're all blaspheming. Because an Elohim does not have to be, depending on context, the creator. So let's just review what angels do. The typical word for angel is malak. And they're usually a messenger with a specific mission, and typically only one thing at a time. Angels are not multitaskers. That doesn't mean they're deficient. It means that's how they were created. And so you might see them as like a deputy. If the ruler, Elohim, makes out a decree, he hands it off to the angel, and then the angel goes and he executes it. And that's why there's a little space of time between the end of Yom Kippur and the closing of the gates and Sukkot. You say, well, what are those little, what's that little space for? Well, the decrees that are sealed up when the gates close at the end of Yom Kippur, those are passed off to angels. And it's going to seem like nothing's going to happen. But then during Sukkot, that is when those warrants, we might call them in modern times, just like if the judge signs off on a warrant, it's going to go to a deputy. Well, until the deputy serves that warrant, you might think you're okay. I've run into a few people like that. I didn't know I had a warrant. Well, you do. It's your Sukkot. So it's kind of that sort of thing. So he gives them whatever power, whatever authority they might need in order to execute that warrant, that mission, whatever it is. We know that angels are created beings. They didn't create themselves. Some are appointed to rule over nations, to manage them, certain domains. They might be over a certain population center, individual human beings. And especially of interest to us is that there are angels appointed over the four beast kingdoms, which is really interesting. We've got the angels of the four winds, but we also have these angels, these four major angels of the four beast kingdoms. And so because an angel is single-minded and he's appointed as an authority over a particular domain, what if some message comes that he perceives is adversarial to his domain? That should sound familiar from the book of Daniel. So we've got two missions that appear to be colliding. There might be resistance, like with the Prince of Persia. No, I don't want you to go to Daniel. I don't want you to tell Daniel these things. You're talking about the end of my domain here. You're talking about how my kingdom will be brought down and how the next kingdom will be set up. No, don't go to Daniel. Don't tell him these things. And so finally, we have this kind of a heavenly war going on where it takes another angel who has a particular message, power, authority, who can override the Prince of Persia. And why and who that is of particular interest to us because we have something in common with that angel. But to our perception, if we're praying for something and we're not getting the answer, if nothing seems to be happening and time is passing, just remember, it's time to you only. In the heavenly realm, it's not really a big issue. But because we live in this space of time, it might feel as though it's taking a long time to get an answer on this. From our perspective, yes. From there, they're just doing what they have to do. They're just working. So, again, that conversation that Yeshua had in a dispute, it actually occurred at Hanukkah, which is prophetic. That they would ask him, are you the Messiah? Tell us plainly. And he starts talking about sheep. So we want to go back and figure out, other than the 7 shepherds and the 8 princes, what would he be referring to that they would already know about? And this would make them very angry. It's a matter of knowing what is in a Jewish mindset of the first century and knowing exactly what he's doing that's setting them off. And then you can appreciate it a little more, what he's, when he's tying them into hermeneutical knots. But again, Elohim, more than one particular definition of it. You have to know the context. And when we don't know the context, we tend to make up some pretty fantastic things. But they can be magistrates, they can be angels, they can be judges. So it can be human beings, as well as it can be Elohim, the creator, or an Elohim, some sort of angel or majesty. So let's throw another scripture in there, since we started with that yesterday. In Song of Songs chapter 3, and our focus here is the Mishkan, the place where the presence dwells. So in Song of Songs 3:6, and the point I'm making here is the mission of Israel was the same as what is assigned to angels. When Israel fails to live up to their duties, then there are majesties out there who can step in. It's not always the most orderly process then either. At any rate, here's the question. Who is this coming up from the wilderness? Who is this coming up from the wilderness? Like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the scented powders of the merchant. All right, 3 things. As Israel comes up from the wilderness, she has an appearance. She looks like columns of smoke. Well, there were columns of smoke, absolutely, in the wilderness. She was led by a column of smoke. But there were other smokes and smokers. There was the sacrificial altar, where you have a fire that never went out. And just imagine this, guys. That fire never went out, even after they covered it to carry it. If you're one of the nations watching this go through the wilderness, let's say you're just standing up on top of the scorpion's ascent, watching these Israelites traipse down through the wadi, and you see the Levites carrying the altar of sacrifice, and that baby's smoking. It's covered up, and it's still smoking. It's a supernatural fire. It's not going to go out, and it's not going to burn up the cover either. How odd. So there's another column of smoke. You've got the incense altar. Columns of smoke would go up from the incense altar. And you have to take the coals from the sacrificial altar in order to keep the incense altar going. See, if you don't have a sacrificial altar, what prayer do you have? How well do you think your prayers will be heard if you're not putting yourself on the altar of sacrifice? Because you couldn't take the coals from any other place. The coals are going to come from your pain, I guarantee you. But that's exactly what's going to light you up, and that's what's going to make your prayers passionate and heartfelt. They're perfumed with myrrh and frankincense. These are thought to be the actual spices of the altar sacrifices. You have to put a handful, again, of the frankincense on top of the altar sacrifices. The myrrh is part of the recipe, of course, for the incense. But that final thing, what is that? Who is that? Who is this coming up from the wilderness? Why is that a question? Maybe it's because there's been a transformation. Maybe these innumerable children of Abraham have been transformed to the place that they're almost unrecognizable. Now think, do you know of somebody who was saved in a horrible condition? They had literally just descended where you thought if they go down one more level, they'll be dead. And the Father, in his mercy, reached down and picked them up. Somebody taught them the message of salvation in Messiah Yeshua. And they were saved, and then they began to walk in their salvation. And over time, if you look at them today, could be me, could be you, would those people back then even recognize you today if they only knew you back then? If they knew you as just the rubbish of Abraham, but now they know you as this refined myrrh and frankincense coming up from the wilderness. That's the idea there, transformation. And the scented powders, again, that's avakah. It's going to be Strong's H81 for you other nerds. And they're the scented powders of the merchant, which means they're coming from faraway places. That's the idea of a merchant when you read it in Scripture. They come from faraway places, and if I'm looking around, I think some of us have come from faraway places. We're far, far away from Jerusalem, that's for sure. But the rabbis say that this dust, this avakah, this refinement that occurred to the tribes in the wilderness was a result that goes all the way back to Jacob's fight at the Yavok stream as he's crossing over from the land of Lavan. Remember, he divides everything, he divides out the flocks and all that, and he says, okay, Esau's coming, it's about over. If I divide them up, maybe we can survive. But what he does is he keeps going back and forth across the stream at night. Now, this is a stream. I know it says river. It is not a river, unless you're looking at it in the rainy season. It's just a stream, so it's not a big deal, the stream itself. It's just that it's demarcating a place in Jacob's development. And they say that as Jacob wrestles all night long, what at first appears to be a man, and then he finally realizes this is an angel that I'm fighting with. This is no human being. But what is transforming right there is he's bringing 11 of his sons back over into the land of promise. They are rising up to their inheritance. And so they say out of this wrestling match with what they're going to describe as Esau's angel. Now, I'm not married to that idea. I've heard all kinds of good ideas about who this angel was. I've heard that it's a pre-incarnation of Yeshua. I've heard some other things. But just for the sake of argument today, let's just say they're right on this and see if it takes us anywhere. They say it was Esau's ministering angel that Jacob had to face, and he had to fight all night long. In this case, Jacob knew, I don't need to turn back. I'm going to the land. I have a mission. I need to fight through this. We know something about this angel. It was necessary for him to leave at daybreak. He says, the dawn is breaking. I have to go now. I really have to go now. We can't fight anymore. Wouldn't you love to hear somebody say that? It's sun up. I can't fight with you anymore. It's like, please, Lord, let the sun come on up. But remember how we defined, remember our prophetic glossary we learned yesterday? We said that night can represent the exile, but then day or the dawn can represent the end of the exile, and then the day represents Israel dwelling in its territory in obedience and unity. And that's why you had the doubled prophecies in that passage that we read yesterday, where you saw the couplets of everything. You could see there would be 2 exiles. And you would have to ask the watchman, how far gone is the night? How far gone is the night? Because you need an answer to 2 questions. It's 2 separate questions, even though they're the same question. That's our question. How far gone is the night? How close are we to coming up out of the wilderness? And so what was kicked up in that battle, they say, was the avakah, or the dust of Jacob. And you've read the dust of Jacob in prophetic passages. They say this comes from the verb avak, which means wrestle, and that's where you see avak in the wrestling match between, if this is Esau's angel, like I said, I'm not going to sign my name to who that actually was, because if it wanted us to know, it would have explicitly said, probably. At any rate, Jacob has this fight, avak, wrestle. What comes out of it, avakah. And they say it's because of this avakah that Adonai took the avakah, he took the dust of Jacob, and he stored it under his throne. And it was because of this dust that became so precious that Jacob earned the right to place those blessings upon his 12 sons and therefore upon the 12 tribes of Israel. So any blessing that you are enjoying as an Israelite would have been derived directly from the dust of Jacob. So that face-to-face meeting that he had with Esau's angels, it holds a key. It's going to explain some things. He says, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go until you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? He said, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have contended with God. The question here is this Elohim with a big E, or is this Elohim with a small e? Is this the Creator himself, or is this an appointed Elohim? Someone under his authority, an angel, a messenger. You have contended with Elohim and with men, and have prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen Elohim. You know we don't get capital letters in Hebrew, and it'll drive you crazy sometimes. So we don't know if we have seen Elohim the Creator or if we have seen Elohim an angel, an angelic majesty. I have seen Elohim face to face, yet my life has been spared. So we don't know for sure whether he literally saw Elohim or Elohim face to face. Now we're told this in Exodus 33:20, you cannot see my face, for mankind shall not see me and live. So the question still kind of remains, what did Jacob see? Well, the next day, as he faces Esau, in Genesis 33:10, Jacob said, no, please, if now I have found favor in your sight, then accept my gift from my hand, for I see your face as one sees the face of God. And you have received me favorably, as one sees the face of God. This time he's not really saying, I think I've seen God. But was he really saying that before? It's hard to tell from the text if we're just reading it straight out of the no capital letters Hebrew text. So how could we reconcile those two things? Often that's our trouble. We can see things that tend to conflict, and rather than try to reconcile them, we just pick one and go with that. And that's not really a solution. Historically, the Jewish sages have seen this particular definition of Elohim as a divinely appointed majesty. And so I said, well, is there any evidence of this in the New Testament? 2 Peter 2:10, it says, especially those who indulge the flesh and its corrupt passion and despise authority. Reckless, self-centered, they speak abusively of angelic majesties without trembling. So there are angelic majesties out there that tick us off. And sometimes we cheer them on, right? We don't always know what their mission is. That's the question. Is this something that I need to, coming out of the Pentecostal background, I've sat back there before because Mama wouldn't let me go outside when the prayer line went too long unless I could sneak out. See, if she went up in the prayer line, I could sneak out. But you see all this binding and loosing and casting out of things, and sometimes if you know the person, you're like, oh, I don't know if you need to bind and loose that. That's just kind of what they do. They just get themselves into that. I don't know we can blame that on Satan. We might need to blame that on drinking, drugs, disrespect the parents, rebelliousness, arrogance. I could see a whole list of things that might be other than Satan. And so when something gets in our way, a lot of times we want to cast it out. What did Balaam want to do? He wanted to cast that angel out. And that angel says, no, you don't want to do that. That would be foolish. Now you listen close, Balaam. And sometimes when something appears to be in our way, we need to listen close. We need to start praying and say, is this something I need to fight through? Are you trying to tell me I'm on the wrong track here and I need to turn around and go back to where I came from and listen again? Rather than revile anything that gets in our way. Not everything that gets in your way is Satan. Sometimes it is. And a lot of times that Satan, small s, not big S, a Satan is just an adversary, by the way. It's an obstacle. It's something that opposes you. It'll prosecute you. It doesn't have to be the big S. It can be your little s. And so sometimes those Satans get in your way in order to change your behavior, to change the track that you're on. Jude 1:8 says, in the same way, these people also, dreaming, defile the flesh, reject authority, and speak abusively of angelic majesties. Something both of those passages have in common is the people who are despising and speaking abusively of the angelic majesties, they reject authority. Do we ever do that? See, that's the trouble with joining a congregation. We feel like the leadership may not know much more than we do. Oh, I remember when you started out. What did Paul tell Timothy? Don't let anybody despise your youth. You know what you know, and you have the authority I have placed upon you. And so sometimes we despise authority when actually we're despising what the Father has put there for a purpose, to help us along or to stand in our way. And if we just rebuke and revile everything that gets in our way, you might be rebuking and reviling something that has been appointed to you for your growth, so that you will understand principles of authority, so that you will learn to judge in the wilderness before he tries to even take you up to Jerusalem where you'll defile it. These majesties are given a measure of glory, of kavod. I think this is why frequently, like Manoah and his wife, they're seeing an angel, they're seeing an entity, some sort of angelic majesty, and they're trying to worship it as Elohim. And a lot of times in these situations, let's say, don't do that. Stop doing that. What you're perceiving in that majesty is that bit of glory that has been placed upon them to execute the mission. That's their authority that has been placed on it. It's not derived from inside themselves. It has to be given to them. Sometimes it'll speak of them as having hod, or honor. So these majesties will be given kavod and hod, glory and honor, in order to execute the mission. They never want you to worship them as being the originator, as mistaking them with Elohim, the Creator. They are simply appointed authorities. And it should be very atypical to wrestle with these things. Atypical. Sometimes you have to wrestle with something, but you can see, if this was Esau's angel, he was sent there for a purpose, so that what could be extracted out of that was the scented powders of the merchants in the wilderness. So that we would be able to go up, so that we would know how to serve under a holy throne as the dust of Jacob. These things have the appearance of divine glory, yet they are created. They are under authority just like we are. And so you don't talk to them in most cases. You see, the dialogue with these angels is limited in Scripture. You don't read a lot about it. It's because you don't need to be talking to them. You don't talk to them. You talk to him. He's the one who sends them. And so if you're not sure, is this adversary in my way here to hinder me because I'm on the wrong track? Talk to him. Am I supposed to fight through this thing? Talk to him. Am I supposed to turn around, go back and reset? Talk to him. You should be very suspicious if something starts talking to you. It's just, you appeal to their king. You appeal to their creator. But Jacob says that when he sees Esau, it's like seeing the face of an Elohim. We don't know if it's Elohim or Elohim, but we know that Esau had to come under authority. At that point, because of this wrestling match, Esau had to come under authority. No matter what he had in his mind to do to Jacob, on the way there, he had to come under authority. So in a sense, Jacob kind of did wrestle with an Elohim and Elohim. He wrestled both with Elohim and an Elohim that looked like Esau. And they say that's what, if you have a ministering angel, they say that the angel actually resembles you. It looks much like you. I don't know, is that the way the angels sort themselves out? Oh, you're so-and-so's angel. Yeah, I don't know. Never seen one of those and don't probably expect to for a while. Bizrat Hashem. But you see, Manoah asks the angel's name as well. Just like Jacob, he says, let me know your name, because if I know your name, I'll know your purpose. That's the thing about a name. I love the progression of the books of the Torah. We've got Bereshit, what was in the beginning. Then we got Shemot, names. Names tell you a purpose. Then Vayikra. Vayikra means to call. When you call something in Hebrew, you place a purpose upon it. So the purpose is placed upon the name. Then they go into the wilderness. In that wilderness, they are perfected in their purpose through what? Devarim, words. How about that? Talk about a short message with big books. But Manoah, he asked this angel's name, and he says, why are you asking my name, seeing that it's wonderful? It's Peleh, secret, wonderful, miraculous. The text really doesn't tell us there whether it's really God that they've seen. They think they've seen God, or was this an angel, a sent one, who has something of the majesty of God, but yet this majesty is placed upon him. And he says, Peleh, it's wonderful. Well, that is one of the names of God, right? Peleh, his name is going to be wonderful. Or Peleh Yoetz, wonderful counselor. It depends on whether you put the two words together. And it seems to be this is what happens. When he sends an angel with a mission, he will take one of his names or one of his aspects and place it upon that angel so that you know what its calling and purpose is. Now, if you were ever inclined to think you might be having an interaction with an angel, because you could be. We're always showing hospitality, right? We don't know who might come sit at your table. If you're in doubt, ask a name. What did you say your name was? See what they say. But this is the aspect of Yod He Vav He, whatever that name might be, that reflects what's the mission? Why am I here? What am I here to do, for you or to you? So if you can know that name, you might have a better handle on what you should be doing next, because it's revealing a divine attribute to you, like Peleh, wonderful, miraculous. They knew they were about to get a miracle. Gavriel, the strength of El. Like El Gibor. You know the name El Gibor? Gavriel, it's the strength of El. So let's look at Daniel right quick. We'll have to wrap it up here in a few minutes. In Daniel chapter 10, we get lots of clues as to how these dynamics work. Gabriel tells Daniel, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia was standing in my way for 21 days. And then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia. And then he goes down and he says, do you understand why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. So I'm leaving. And behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. You can see why the prince of Persia did not want this message to get through. If his job is to take care of Persia, the second beast kingdom, he doesn't want to hear about Greece, the third beast kingdom that's about to come. It's adversarial to his domain. And so what's happening, Gabriel is getting resistance. No, don't take that message. Don't take that message. And then he says, however, I will tell you what is recorded in the writing of truth. Yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. Now notice the wording there. It took Michael to break through the prince of Persia, because there is a divine aspect in Michael that is different from Gabriel. Gabriel, the strength of El, needed Michael to break through to Daniel with this particular message, because it has to do, again, with everything John is telling us in Revelation about the beast. So these angels, they have names. You might refer to them as princes, sarim. Like we said, we have lots of names. But this vision of Daniel is disturbing the prince of Persia, because it's signaling the end of his domain's preeminence as a world power. So Gabriel needs Michael to get this message through. And what's interesting is he says, Daniel, Michael is your prince. Who is the prince of Israel? Michael. Do we see Michael fighting in Revelation? That's good news, isn't it? That's our guy. He's on our team. And so he says in Daniel 12:1, now at that time, now we're going to the end time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise. Here again, we're told Michael is standing guard over us. It doesn't matter where we are. In this wilderness of the peoples, it does not matter where you are camped. He is your guardian. He is standing guard over you. And if there is any decree that is adversarial to you, if there is anything coming against you, he's probably going to be involved. But you don't pray to Michael. You pray to El, who appointed Michael. He says he will arise. What does that mean? If Michael arises at that time, it means Israel also rises. And there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. So when Michael rises, it's because we are rising too. We are being resurrected. So what is it about his name? What aspect of the Holy One can we look at the name Michael and say, what does that have to do with us? Well, that means there's no one to compare to him. Who is like El? Michael. What do we sing in our, well, maybe not everybody, but what do some of us sing in our fellowships? Michamoka. Who is like thee, O Lord among the gods? Who is like thee, glorious in holiness? You know what we're doing? We are singing an ancient hymn, not just of the Song of the Sea, but an ancient hymn of our own identity, calling, and purpose. There is no one who can ultimately prevail in any struggle with El, and Michael represents that to us. That is the aspect of Adonai that prevailed over the prince of Persia. That is the aspect of Adonai that can prevail over Rome, the red one, Esau. We don't have to remain under that dominion. Michael will rise, we will rise, and Israel will come up from the wilderness with the scented powders of the merchant. So let's look at two passages to finish up. And that's the ancient Song of the Sea. Who is like you among the gods, O Lord? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in praises, working wonders? You're seeing our angel names in Hebrew. If you were reading that in Hebrew, you would be hearing the angel names because you would be hearing his aspect. But now, here we come up from the wilderness. We're staged. Who is this coming up? This is the dust of Jacob, refined, fragrant, the product of sacrifice. It says in Deuteronomy 33:29, blessed are you, Yisrael, who is like you. Sound familiar? A people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help, and he who is the sword of your majesty. We have no majesty of our own. We have his majesty. Just like an angel has no majesty of its own, it has his majesty. He who is the sword of your majesty. So your enemies will cringe before you, and you will trample on their high places. In the same way that your father Jacob trampled the dust in his wrestling match with the angel all night long in order for your dust to be perfected so that it could come up from the wilderness, so that people would see you as a people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help, he who is the sword of your majesty. Your enemies will cringe before you, and you will trample their high places. That is your calling. That is your purpose in the wilderness. That's what you're being prepared to do. You are going to display to the nations in this wilderness of the peoples, as he refines you, you are going to be exposed to them as the salvation of Adonai. This is what happens when he sends his salvation. They don't look like everybody else. They light up everybody else. They display his majesty. They trample the high places of the enemy in the land of promise. Let's quit running from the evening news. Let's quit running from the news story of the day. Oh my goodness, they're going to cut this off. Oh my goodness, they're going to do that to us. Oh my goodness, what's going on? Who cares? That's them. You need to light up because there might be some more of us out there with them that need to get out of them and get in here with us. You need to start trampling those high places. Cut it off. This is how we have to conduct ourselves right now, today, tomorrow, and every day. We have to wear his clothes of majesty, because if we're running around looking defeated, it looks a little silly. To wear his salvation and to wear his majesty, and we're moaning and groaning about, oh my goodness, the economy, and oh, the gas is so high, and oh my, and I've done it too. Can you believe the price of plane tickets? You know what? That's not his majesty. I'm not wearing that. I'm wearing my complaint, my bitterness, my rebellion. No, he's in charge of it. It doesn't matter how much it costs. If we have to, like I said yesterday, if he cuts off the food in the wilderness and all we can eat is his word, we will be the fattest people on earth. I'm getting there already. So we're going to have to be humble. He says, I took you into the wilderness to humble you, to see what was in your heart, to see whether you would obey me or not. So don't be terrified by the nations looking on at what's happening to us, because we're the ones terrifying them. We are absolutely terrifying.